think more than anything else, we want to bring awareness to two schools that have been mired in sexual abuse and cover-up and corruption for over the last 50 years. And that's something that we want to also concentrate on today. We know the game's going to be a great game. It's going to be a battle. But there's also another fight that's happening off the field, and that is to have justice at two universities that are probably two of the most prominent sports universities here in America. And that's why I have Rocky Ratliff, who is a Strauss victim, standing here alongside an Anderson victim, because we feel like our voices together are stronger than our voices separate. So let me introduce you to Rocky Ratliff.
Good afternoon. My name is Rocky Ratliff. I am a Dr. Strauss survivor from The Ohio State University. I wrestled at the university from 1995 to 1997. I'm also an attorney licensed in the state of Ohio. I represented 48 other victims in the Richard Strauss case. 7 of the victims settled, 42 were dismissed by the federal court. We are currently under appeal. I learned about John Vaughn from a media representative from NBC named Corky out of New York. He asked me about Mr. Vaughn and how he was camped out in front of the president's house. I immediately got on to learn. I knew about the Dr. Anderson and the victims of Dr. Anderson in their case, but I did not know that one of the victims had started a camp out in front of the president's house. So I immediately got on, felt compelled to come that weekend. That was on, like, I think a Wednesday night. I came that first weekend that John Vaughn was here, and I've been coming up pretty much every weekend since to show my support for John Vaughn, because John Vaughn and the victims here in the Dr. Anderson case are getting the same rhetoric from the University of Michigan that we got at The Ohio State University. And that rhetoric is that Mr. Vaughn and all these other victims are brave for coming out. And we're going to offer and try to get fair resolutions to their cases. But what they're really offering is hush money to go sit in the corner so John Vaughn and the rest of the victims up here in Michigan will go away. Because the University of Michigan, as well as the Ohio State University, are all about their brands. They're about big business. They're about money. It's not about survivors. They're not about the students anymore. And just to give you some background, the Ohio State University grosses about $7.8 billion a year. Only $985 million are tuition and fees. So we're talking about big corporations, big business, and that's why victims of sexual abuse are being dismissed. Ohio State and the University of Michigan have a big game this weekend. We are going to be up here in solidarity. Me and Mr. Vaughn and a group of us are going to come up here to raise awareness for the sexual abuse survivors, not only in our cases, but those that are currently on campus that stop by and they sign Mr. Vaughn's support. They stop by and tell Mr. Vaughn how they were sexually raped and molested on this campus. And that's going on at The Ohio State University as well. These universities have offered no assurances that our current and future students will be protected. So we make sure that their voices are going to be heard. We are here talking for those that can't. So this weekend we're going to be up here. Now, these universities, meaning the University of Michigan and Ohio State, are supposed to be leaders in higher education. But all we've seen from them as to sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape, all we've seen, and I know they'll have great game plans this Sunday, but all we've seen is a game plan of how to conceal, cover up, and then eventually dismiss those victims and survivors. And that's why I stand with John Vaughn. And I understand today, and I'm sure I'll get questions about the statute of Mr. Schembeckler, the beloved coach here at the University of Michigan. It was defaced. It didn't come from me, it didn't come from Mr. Vaughn, it didn't come from any of our fathers. But it clearly shows the frustration of current students and the public as to how the victims are being treated here at the University of Michigan. Everybody here feels they've been dismissed, both then and now. I often wonder which is worse. if you knew about it, concealed it, and covered up, or you now know through your investigations, both here at University of Michigan and the Ohio State University, this happened. There was concealed and covered up, and now you know. Now you know. But just like those administrations and those boards back then, you're now dismissing them at the same rate. So this university needs to understand the frustrations of the current students, probably the state of Michigan, of how this is being dealt with. And it pains me as a survivor and an attorney that's heard countless stories. And I've set up here at this campsite we're at right now and heard students, current students, tell and pour their heart out to Mr. Vaughn and what he's doing here, thanking him for protecting them because this university and this president behind me failed to do so. And I've been up here and heard the stories myself. That they would issue today, this university would issue a statement that's harsher about some destruction of a statue of a man who either knew or was negligent in knowing that sexual abuse was happening amongst his team. At The Ohio State University, all the coaches knew. All of them. We spend 6 to 10 hours a day with those guys. They knew it was happening. So I don't know how Bo didn't know, but if he didn't, he was very negligent in not knowing. So when that happens, the statue actually gets defaced or some paints on it, and I don't condone any of that. That's public property. You shouldn't be doing that. But when their statement is harsher about property damage and we're going to go out and seek them, but yet they have people that concealed and covered up sexual abuse and molestation amongst their ranks right now, but don't issue the same harsh statements, it pains me. It's a slap to my face, Mr. Vaughn's face, everybody who signed that board. We should all be a little pissed off and a little ticked off of what is happening. And if this administration, the Board of Regents of the University of Michigan, the Board of Trustees at The Ohio State University, the governors who are here betting on this year's game, if they had half of that offense, or half of what it took that person to go, the fortitude to go do that in the face, if they had half of that internal fortitude, eradication of sexual abuse and molestation amongst their ranks at this university and the University of The Ohio State University wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. You have the biggest and brightest minds here and at Ohio State, and they have all the money, but yet they're doing nothing to protect their current students. And I'm appalled at it. And they should be embarrassed at the week of this game that that's the statement they put out. They've offered no statement in support of either the University of Michigan or the Ohio State University victims. Thank you. I'll take questions whenever you guys have questions. I'll turn it back over to what we consider. I mean, honestly, I'm here in the state of Michigan. We followed both the Michigan State females case with Dr. Nasser. We have followed John Vaughn and his case here with Dr. Anderson. And I can just tell you that the girls at Michigan State are 5'2" superheroes to us. I'm getting emotional about it. We wouldn't be here without those girls or Mr. Vaughn. He is a superhero, and we will follow him because he is now our chosen leader to get behind to try to eradicate some things here in our society. And really why we don't want to talk about it and why people don't want to talk about it is because the biggest, baddest dudes on our planet, I have UFC champions, Olympians in my group that I represent. And if someone like John Vaughn, or in my group, someone like Mark Coleman, who held the UFC heavyweight title belt in both Pride and the UFC, and he's a UFC Hall of Famer, if he can get sexually molested, any one of us in society can. That's why they don't want to talk about it. Because we're all vulnerable, and it's happening every day. And if we have to wake up and realize that someone like John Vaughn can be molested, any of our kids can be, we can be, and we don't want to face something like that. That 1 in 6 males are sexually molested, and they won't tell you until they're 52. That's what's currently going on, and we will follow Mr. Vaughn. Thank you.
So we'll open up any questions questions that you guys have.
John, first of all, hello. And can you talk about your thoughts on when you learned about colonialism and understanding what that person was different here in the past?
Yeah, I was shocked, especially after HBO coming out and interviewing Tad and myself, Jared last night at the timing of the vandalism. I don't condone it in any way, but like Rocky said, there's a frustration that the students, that the individuals who live in the Ann Arbor area have about the cover-ups and the scandals dealing with student safety, sexual abuse, and rape here on this campus. So although I can't condone it, but I can understand it because as human beings, when the frustration level kind of boils up, people act out. But like Rocky said, and I've been pretty silent about it today because it's hit me pretty hard that you will be more angry, obstinate, and focused on attacking and finding and searching out the people that defaced a bronze statue. But yet you have individuals that still work at the University of Michigan that were the gatekeeper to the greatest rapist in sports. And so, you know, it's a sad and it's a happy day. Day before Ohio State is always a day that I get up for. I've been getting up for that since 1988. But it saddens me that we even have to be here having an awareness press conference when collectively there's over 3,000 men and women that have been raped at the hands of these two universities, but yet the story today is a statue.
Did you guys see anything directly to the people responsible?
I will tell you this, when I first came out here, there were paintings and writings that had been scrubbed from right where I stand today. So I will never can never understand anybody's frustration and how they act out. Like I said, I don't condone it. I chose this way to act out on my frustration and my anger. I just hope that, you know, whoever did it rethinks their next move for communication, because it's obvious that the University of Michigan cares more about statues and buildings than they do people.
John, what would you like to see the university do? What do you think the university needs to do right now for as much recognition as belongs as
I should never have to visit my beloved university and have a student tell me that I think about when's the next time I'm going to get raped or sexually harassed or sexually abused on this campus than I do thinking about my major. The university needs to get real about its culture of abuse and cover up at the hands of students and also within their faculty. And they also need to get real that the students and the professors are what fill these buildings, that they're so dead set on prioritizing who's going to get this name and that name. These are buildings, these are bricks and glass and whatnot, but right now this is a place for higher learning, and learning is not happening at the rate that it should be because so many students are concentrated on student safety. The university needs to wake up. They need to start hearing the students. They need to start hearing other survivors of sexual assault that were at the hands of either doctors that were here, professors that were here, or students that were here, and get real that there's a human rights atrocity going on real time at the University of Michigan. And until they wake up and look at themselves in the mirror and realize that this is actually a problem, it's an epidemic. Quite frankly, it's become a syndicate between our schools of abuse, rape, cover-up. And until that happens, we won't move forward. We won't move forward as a university. We won't move forward as a community. So I'm hoping they're listening because it's interesting that every statement that has come out has always been self-protective. It's been apologies for what a dead person has done. They've never taken responsibility for the culture that permeated here to allow these things to happen. 50 years of frustration and fear is what's running rampant on the campus of the University of Michigan as well in the city of Ann Arbor. So until they get real about that, there's really nothing that they can say until they realize and admit that in some areas we aren't leaders in best.
What do you think happened to the statue?
You know, I don't really care. To be perfectly honest with you, I've never thought about the statue, never thought about what, names on buildings and things of that nature because they're inanimate objects. And we put too much emphasis on these inanimate objects. They're not people. This is a statue of a man, but that man is not here. So whatever the university decides to do or not do, it's not my call.
Well, if I can ask you, the 47 cases you said were dismissed, on what grounds were those dismissed?
They dismissed them on the statute of limitation grounds. However, it's just not 40-some. There's been probably approximately about 250 cases that were dismissed. So it just wasn't my case. I only represented a portion of those. But it was dismissed on the statute of limitations grounds. And we were arguing that it took over a $7 million investigation with 2 doctors to do it as sexual abuse. How at 19 are we supposed to know it was sexual abuse, especially when the trainers backed up what was being done to us, saying it's a normal exam. Other guys that we trusted was telling us it's a normal exam. You have to remember, at least at Ohio State, they reported 2,800 sexual assaults to the U.S. government and over 170 rapes at the hands of doctors' trials. That's Ohio State reporting. And you also have to remember that, I guess it'd be a rhetorical question for you and your viewers, that Ohio State spent almost $8 million to tell us what we already knew, which is all this atrocity happened to us. I think the University of Michigan spent almost $7 million to that. 11.9 million according to Mr. Bond. So that would put us up to 18 or 19 million to tell us that doctors molested us. You would have to ask both universities, what have they done with that information? So they got information that cost them, 18, 19 million dollars, and they've not made, that I know of at Ohio State, one change. So your next predator is probably amongst them right now. They just either don't know, don't care, or helping them conceal it as we speak. Because John Vaughn and these victims here are not the only lawsuits, because I saw Mr. Vaughn speak where there was 3 or 4 young ladies that had active lawsuits against the university for professors doing this. So this is just not something we're making up. The universities at both schools have confirmed this, but yet will take no action. So that's where we're at.
John, last night I saw some videos on Twitter of people going out and kind of memorializing Schimbeckler, saying that he meant more to them than their own family members in some way. I think that we're seeing more men kind of having a hard time coming to terms with the fact that this is a man who was abused, a man perpetrated this abuse. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's definitely difficult for men to come out and just find it strange that any man who has flaws is made into a deity. It's just something I don't understand. And it's very interesting that I've heard some of it. People that have come by here is they only met the man one time, or shook his hand at an event. You know, he said people are coming to my home. Right? He asked about my mother who died of cancer the first time I met him. So I start to wonder what and question what is knowing someone really mean to you. I don't knock it, but I just have a different perspective on it.
Do you think that male sexual abuse is kind of harder for people to wrap their minds around because we don't hear about it quite as much?
Absolutely. Rocky alluded to it earlier. I think in a lot of ethnic communities, it's taboo. It's things we just don't talk about. I've heard some of the most horrible things about, well, how can a big football player, get raped, whatever. You must like it, things of that nature. And I'm like, one, you weren't there, and two, at 18, I didn't know what a prostate was, but I was told I needed to take a prostate exam so I could clear to play. And I needed 49 more before I left here to clear to play. And you cannot, at any time, doubt what I did on the field. So I gave everything for my teammates and everything for this team. And everything was under the guise of medical treatment. So I think there needs to be a day of reckoning to understand what the face of abuse survivors and victims look like. And until we're able to get there, we'll never be able to have a healing conversation.
All right, thank you.
Guys for coming.